as you go among people, as you learn your way of being.
Bienvenue and welcome to Cirque du Sound, a sonic trip brought to you by Cirque du Soleil, where we redefine the boundaries of creativity with some of today's most forward thinkers, doers, and creators. My name is Michel. I'm the creative guide at Cirque du Soleil and your host for today. Right now, in the background, you're hearing the music of our touring show, KOOZA. The concept of the show is a circus in a box, and the name reflects that. KOOZA comes from KOOZA, which is Sanskrit for box, chest, or treasure. Today, we want to explore how being vulnerable can help us discover different ways, like comedy, to understand our place in the world. Josh, a very warm welcome to Cirque du Sound.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
It's an honor. When did you start to consciously make people laugh?
It did start when I was a kid. I was not known as maybe the funniest person. And I definitely wasn't like the most outgoing. So then that also made it surprised people when I went into comedy and everything. But I think that stand-up just lined up with everything that I find interesting and important about life. So, you know, to me, I think that when you are, when you're, you know, creative as a kid, there's a free-flowing creativity that you obviously, hopefully, never lose. But I think that when you decide to take on artistic endeavor as your, you know, main source of income and everything, that's when you realize that there are so many layers to creativity when it's not fun and when there's a deadline and finding ways to be creative for like all the time, even when you don't feel like it or you don't feel creativity can also be that feeling of pure inspiration. And when you don't have that, it's very hard sometimes to make something, you know? And so it started when I was a kid that I thought like, oh, I like making people laugh. I'm not the funniest person, but I'm going to keep doing this. It didn't, in my mind, become possibility for it to be a job until much later.
You write a lot for television, and you know you have to be aware of the news and things that happen in the very day. So your process sometimes has to be fast, right? So how do you deal with that? Because you know if you have a long time to write a one-man show, it's one thing, but if you have to write for TV that evening and you have to change, you have to come up with new things because something happened just today, and you need to to comment on that. How do you deal with that? How do you put yourself in the zone that will allow you to be efficient and not stressed out by that? Or does the stress help you? What's your process on that? Because I'm intrigued because it's not a process that we're used to.
Yeah, I think that for the most part, when you not for yourself, right? So this is for every creative, but not for their whole life, right? Let's say you are in a situation where there's a deadline, or like I was saying before, you don't feel the inspiration or something, but you still have to create something. I think that in those situations, you have to find the sort of math and science in whatever your art is. And then that is how you bridge that gap. So as long as you understand the formula for jokes, you can still make a joke, even if you're not feeling funny that day, and even if they need a joke in 5 minutes. And I think that that's where you find how to do it. The feelings around it are very different because you won't necessarily get to put passion and tons of thought. But I think that there's a time and place for all that stuff. You know, if you're watching my special, if you're watching an hour of me doing comedy, these are all things that I've thought of very deeply for a long time. If you're watching what I've written for TV, it's more than likely I wrote it that day. And so, you know, I think that everything finds its place, because if it took all of us feeling inspired and feeling ready, then very few things would get made. Some beautiful things would still get made, don't get me wrong. When people put that thought and attention into their creativity, you're rarely going to have something that isn't worth sharing. But it's not always the case where you have those luxuries.
It's fine. This is why it's a job, and it's a craft that you perfect. I used to have I'm a recovered actor, and at the acting school, one of my teachers used to say, you need to have a great technique, because, you know, not all nights will be like, oh my God, I'm inspired, you know, and I forget everything, and I'm just no. So the technique is there for those moments that you cannot rely on inspiration. And where did you learn your technique? Did you go to like a school, or you learned as you go? You learned from people?
I think it's as you go, you learn from people, as you learn your way of being, right? Because for stand-up specifically, there are no rules. And so when there aren't any rules, all you can do is bring your own sort of creative DNA to the situation. And whereas with music and with acting and somewhat with the structure of writing jokes, there are things that you can apply that will create some margins for you to live in. But when it comes to just sharing all your thoughts with people, it's just not the same as anything else that I've found, where when you are just free flowing with like no rules, you can really sink or swim. Because I think a lot of artists need that structure, and they will bring you something beautiful if you give them something to work within. And with stand-up, you just don't have that. So I learned my technique and my thought process and my strategy from watching people that I really admire. And then the rest you do have to teach yourself. No one can be up there with you. It wouldn't be the same art if they were. I look at some of my predecessors as coaches. You know, I definitely ask people that I've worked with what they think of jokes while I'm writing. I ask them what they think of sets after I've done them, and I take their notes to heart. And even if I don't apply every note that they give me, the fact that the audience is there as a sounding board, and then your peers are there as an even more precise tuning fork, so that way you're able to make real music with whatever it is that you're doing. Because some people will see an audience, and if the audience doesn't respond to what they're making, they're like, oh, they just don't get it. And it's like, no, it's for them. It's for them. So they have to get it in order for you to be doing what you think you're doing. If they don't get it, you didn't do your job, you know? And if they aren't laughing, I'm not doing my job. So I can't just sit back and be like, oh, that joke was just so brilliant that they don't get it. It's like, no, I didn't write it well enough for it to be grabbed, you know?
I totally agree. It's funny because Cirque du Soleil, as you may know, we were born in the streets. So we were street performers. And that's very important to remember, because people were not intending to see our show, you know, so they're just walking, they're going to the market to get the kids from school and stuff. So you have to grab their attention with something. And if it doesn't work, they'll just walk away. So you got to make it work every second, so that at the end, they will put money in your hat. Otherwise, you will not eat. What was the first theme of your first ever stand-up number?
Oh, yeah.
And how did that theme come? How did you choose that theme?
So I ended up, I think, if I can remember it correctly, I think that it was about how, so I lived in a bad neighborhood growing up, and it was mainly about how we bought an alarm system for the house, which is already insane, because it's like there's nothing in here worth taking, but we have it just in case somebody comes. And then we realized the alarm system worked because someone tried to break in, they triggered the alarm system, and the police showed up 4 days later. And it's like, yeah, there we go.
They actually showed up?
No, the police never showed up.
Showed up for it? Oh yeah,
the police never showed up. But like that was sort of in the theme of what I was talking about that first time, and it went well. And then I just, after that, I was like, oh, that's a thing from my life. that, you know, I can explain to people, get people to relate to that are not living that life at all. Because I went to school with kids that were pretty rich. And so I was like sort of the loner living in, you know, not the best neighborhood while they had no experiences like that. So the fact that I could relate that to them was also, I think, such a powerful thing for me, that I was like, even if I could not make it a job, because originally I went to college for lighting design, and I was going to be a lighting designer for stage shows and for concerts and for all this other stuff. And then it was either choose lighting design or choose comedy. And comedy just brought me so much more joy, and I felt so much more artistically fulfilled doing comedy that's why I went into it. But yeah, that's as much as I can remember from my first set, to be honest with you.
I promise you, every time I will see my alarm system, I will think of you. Especially when it works.
Yeah.
You mentioned about loneliness, and in some of your shows, you explore that theme to be the only child, and that you experience sometimes loneliness and social marginalization. Why has that proven to be a recurring source of inspiration for your work, that loneliness aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for the most part, we're living in an age of loneliness. I think we're the loneliest we've ever been, and we're weirdly the most connected we've ever been. You have access to millions of people in your phone, in your pocket all day, yet some people talk to no one, and when they do talk to people, they feel like no one's listening, because everyone is so thirsty to get a chance for them to speak. And it's understandable. If you feel like you haven't been listened to all day, you might not be as keen to listen. But I think that that's the way that you cure it. You become a great listener, which means more and more people want to share with you. Through that sharing, you build community, and through that community, you eliminate the loneliness. And so I think in all of the things that I make, I want to point out that sort of thing, to point out that we were, a community living separately. And I think that if any work that I do can highlight that you're not alone, because that's the number one, slow killer of people in the modern world is just that feeling of isolation that we all go in and out of, because sometimes you self-isolate. Some people self-isolate to heal. Some people self-isolate to, further their trauma because they're not ready to share. Like, I understand it, but I think that it's one of the main motivators of a lot of destructive behavior is feeling alone, and it takes a lot of work against ego to realize that you're not alone, because to be alone would mean that I Josh, singularly in the world, am too bad, too mean, too uninteresting, too whatever to be loved, and it's like, I'm not that special. Yeah, I mean, that's a tall order to make yourself a person worthy of loneliness. If you are part of the world, then you must be worth the world, So there's something to be said for letting people know that the loneliness that they feel, as real as it is to them, parts of it are an illusion, and that there are people around them ready to take them in. And it's in all the communities that we find, like people join every type of group for the same reason. It's in search of community, whether it's a church, whether it's a club, it could even be a hate group. You're literally joining because of the loneliness that you feel in the community that you're trying to build.
I agree. It's funny because Guy Laliberté at one point was saying he's the founder of Cirque du Soleil, the co-founder with Gilles Sainte-Croix, and he was saying that you don't learn by talking, you learn by listening. But what you're saying is even it's as interesting, because you build a community by your capacity to listen, not by talking, and I find it really inspiring.
Yeah, you can definitely build a cult by talking. You know what I mean?
You're right.
That's probably, most of the real known cults, one guy talking.
You're right.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to listen.
Yeah. No, he doesn't listen to anyone. That's why it always goes south.
My God. Okay, we're talking politics now. Oh my God. The trauma. Do you think that comedy has the power to heal?
I think over time, yes. I think that sometimes there's an inclination for people to use comedy to not have to do work that's desperately needed in their lives that would improve it. So I think comedy can be a Band-Aid, and comedy is definitely a defense mechanism, if nothing else. But I think that for the most part, comedy has a healing power where you are able to finally share. And when you're able to finally share, then now you can really release. And once you've released, you're healed. And so that's the way that I imagine comedy having the power to heal. I definitely think it's a self-discovery thing. I don't know if you can laugh someone's pain away for them. It's something that has to be internal and has to take place in a person's own time, you know?
Do you have personal experiences that you could share with us where you could actually feel the healing power of your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I released my special this year,
it just sounded like, please lie down and
the
shrink office. Share with us some trauma. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. So when I released my special this year, I tell a story in it where, you know, I talk about my father passing and everything, and that was still, you know, this really traumatic moment in my life, and all of this stuff was going on at the same time. But when I was finally able to tell that story and really release it through the jokes I had written, I think that was when I was finally feeling like healed from a deep scar that I had carried with me for so long, where I've been working on processing his death because it was sudden, and then also working on jokes, but also how I feel about those jokes, but also if I should feel bad for, you know, I'm obviously not making fun of my father's passing, but I'm bringing light to the situation of how I felt during it. And I think that the way that I did it felt both, it felt like a joke that my dad would laugh at, which I think is why it felt full circle, and it felt like I had, you know, as much as one can heal from that situation. It's like the thing that came out of this horrible tragedy is a joke that my dad would laugh at. And so I think that feels, you know, that feels really complete, you know?
Can you share some of that story and the humor, so we understand the work you've done, like some of that story and the humor that you brought to it?
I'll give you the shortest version of it that I can, because I think the thing ended up being very long. So I remember the first time I got paid to do comedy. This was crazy to me at the time. I'm pretty sure it was like $1,000 to come do the show. And this is like, I'm not that far into comedy. And I'm so excited that I am already planning how to save the money, because I'm like, I'll just go ahead and take a bus, because if I take the flight, that's going to cut into the money and everything. And I'm on the bus for hours, and it really does like change me as a person. Like, I'm like, I should have just taken the flight. This is crazy. And then this man was asleep next to me, but he was in that level of sleep where he like looked dead. And I don't know what to do. I don't even want to touch him to check for it, because in my mind, if I check this person's pulse and they are dead, I'm not ready for what that is, you know, to my life. And then sure enough, they wake up, but they wake up by pooping their pants.
Oh my God.
And they're screaming. And then he runs to the bathroom on the bus. And so then everyone on the bus is freaking out, right? And so I like tell that whole story. And then I talk about how when I was like 26 at the time, I got the call that my dad was sick. And it was like this life-changing thing, because I had never really lost family super suddenly. I had lost people before, but they had all got sick, and it was over time. And I was able to talk with them and say my goodbyes and all that stuff. I get a call from the hospital because my dad called me the night before, and I talked to him, and he did not sound good at all. And they were like, his prognosis is really bad. Like, you may want to get here. And this is years later. I'm working at Tonight Show and everything. And I, run in, I tell my boss hugs me, and he's like, yeah, go, like, do whatever you need to do. So I fly home, and, I hold his hand, I'm talking to him and everything. And I'm very grateful for that time that I got to say goodbye to my dad, And a little while after he had actually passed, I went to a party, and I didn't even go to the party because I don't drink and I don't smoke. So I'm just like aggressively sober at a party. I'm just like very awake at a party, which is too much. So then while I'm at that party, I start feeling bad for being at a party so close to when my dad has passed. I'm like, am I a bad person? Like, that's crazy that I would be at a party right now. And I'm not fun. So I'm not like partying. So I'm just sitting there, and then I start to, like cry. And it's when I realize the process of grief for the people around you is exactly like shitting your pants on a bus. Because even though it's something that happened to you, it's something we all have to deal with. And so then I run to the bathroom and I make the same noises as that guy because I'm just crying the entire time. And then that's what I talked about in the special. But I felt like that was overall a story and an arc and a joke throughout that my dad would find funny.
In a minute, I am going to continue this conversation with award-winning and renowned writer and comedian Josh Johnson, a conversation that explores how comedy can help us be vulnerable, unlock creativity, and understand our place in the world so we can heal and grow. Fans go first. Whether it's early access to seasonal deals or pre-sales, pick your tickets before everybody else. Sign up for Club Cirque today, and you'll be the first to hear about access to special events, pre-sales, and discounts. Take a look behind the curtain and enjoy up-to-date news on all things Cirque du Soleil, including shows, artists, and latest innovations. Visit cirquedusoleil.com to subscribe. Josh Johnson, we've talked a bit about your roots and how you got into comedy, but I want to dig a bit deeper into your philosophy because, well, just like medicine, you seem to be able to use comedy to heal and help others through laughter. And this is something that we can see in our Cirque du Soleil show, KOOZA. The trickster is a clown character. We always cast a dancer to do that because it's very physical, the way he's clowning. And the trickster is the creator of the world, KOOZA. He tries to help out another character called the Innocent by leading them on a journey to discover their place in the world. So my question is, in what ways do you believe comedy can be a powerful tool for addressing social and political issues? And how do you navigate the fine line between humor and controversy in your work?
I believe that comedy can be incredibly powerful with sort of sandwiching thoughts, right? I think that if you tell someone something outright, especially the way we live now, there's a filter that everyone has up. And whether it's a religious or political filter, there's certain things that as soon as you say buzzwords, there's no way you're getting in. And I think that there's some aspect of that is just a person making up their mind and sort of fortifying their beliefs. And I think that it's important for people to have beliefs and take them to heart. And I think questioning them is important, so that way you can make sure you're still feeling the same things years from now. But I think that it's done a bit lazier now to where this is how I grew up, so this is how I'm going to stay. Or I came to this conclusion when I was 29 and I'm not changing it. And I think that comedy is a way of letting some of those aspects of how to live a different life or different perspectives seep in, because everyone is willing to laugh. I feel like I've met very few people who do not like the way that laughing makes them feel. It's so important to me, no matter who the person is and no matter what they're saying, to let a comedian finish a joke, just because misdirection and perspective are what we deal in. And I think you can think a joke is going one way and then it ends up having a surprise twist at the end, or you think you know what the person's going to say and they take you in a different direction, or you think you already know all of your feelings on a subject and then someone offers a perspective that is incredibly unique. And so to me, those are the most important aspects of doing comedy.
I'd like you to tell us about your process. How do you, because you write for yourself, but sometimes you write for a host of a show. How do you get to know that person? And because you're writing for that person, so how do you get to feel who that person is and what will fit well in that person's mouth? You know, what words and what, the rhythm of delivery and stuff. How do you get to very good at that?
I mean, if you are lucky enough to be able to watch a lot of their work previously, that's a great way, because then you can almost mimic their sensibilities. And then for the writing actually, in a weird way, the jokes are the easy part. It's everything around the jokes that becomes difficult. So the actual joke is like very easy. What they would say to get to that joke is what's hard. You know, plenty of people would make the same type of joke, if that makes sense. Like, how would I put this?
No, I understand.
Like, you already understand where most people would joke about their whatever mother-in-law or whatever, but the way that they would say it, that expression of voice, that's what becomes very difficult. And that's why it helps if you have lots of hours of their own jokes, or lots of time with them to talk to them, to see how they speak. Now it's easy, you know? And then when you're writing for yourself, I think everyone's process is unto themselves. Just like I mentioned, the DNA of perspective, I think there's a DNA of process where some people have to be on stage talking to you for the first time, expressing an idea, and that idea is how they come to the joke. And then some people have to sit at a desk quietly for an hour and just write out all their thoughts, and then they make jokes from that. And some people are just naturally funny in a way that can't be written, you know?
Any food for thought that you'd like to leave us with?
I think that for most creatives, especially depending on where you want to go in your career or what you want to create, I think that, you know, there are people who will see the Cirque show and be like, I want to make something as much of a like magnificent spectacle as that, right? But right now I don't have the tools, or I don't have the know-how, or I don't have, you know, all that stuff. And I think that it's important with where you want to go creatively and where you want to get career-wise to be equal amounts of persistent and patient. And I think that you have to be persistent because nothing comes without lots of practice and lots of failure. And you have to be patient because nothing worth keeping sort of comes to you overnight and everything. And so I think that for the most part, those two in combination will always service you well, because persistence is the hard work and is the consistency that leads people to believe in you and trust you and want more from you and to see what you're doing next. And then patience is you accepting that, just like we talked about before, about the audience having to get it and everything, that, you know, patience is also you accepting that in time the audience will get it, because you're working on making it better for them to get, you know. I think that I think a lot of people want to be more vulnerable in their art and more more skilled and personal in their creativity. And I think that it comes with time. You have to be patient with yourself, and the persistence of showing up every day just leads to results, even if they're not always the results we want. I think that you're always going to be better off a year from now from having thought carefully and being honestly vulnerable than you will, from just sort of trying to get ahead, whether it's social, whether it's, whatever it is, just trying to like sneak ahead,
Wow. Thank you. These are great words to finish this conversation.
I want to thank you, Josh Johnston, for joining us today. And Josh, it's been a true pleasure. And there's a lot of things that I think we learned thanks to you. It's like you plant seeds in our consciousness, and they will keep growing.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you so much. Join us for each episode as we delve into the themes and ideas that underpin Cirque du Soleil's shows. Learn more about the roots of creativity and how to keep your eyes, mind, and heart open to new sources of creative inspiration. And remember, it can come from anywhere and anyone. Thank you so much for listening to Cirque du Sound. I am Michel. À la prochaine.
Cirque du Sound is produced by Cirque du Soleil with technical and story production by Jar Audio.
If you like what you heard today on Cirque du Sound, please subscribe, comment, and leave a review.